You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. He was considered one of the most successful and promising politicians in modern Alabama history. For 3 decades, former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman held all the top elected offices in the state. It is in his new book, Stealing Our Democracy, How the Political Assassination of a Governor Threatens Our Nation. He tells the tale of what happens when you mix politics and federal prosecutors. I talked with Don Siegelman about his ordeal, how he went to prison, and who he blames. Don Siegelman, glad to have you here at Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I am delighted to meet you and be on your show. It's an honor.
Well, let's talk about it. Actually, our paths have crossed before, so I have met you before, and I'm familiar with your story. You say, cover of your book, you call it Stealing Our Democracy, How the Political Assassination of a Governor Threatens Our Nation. You call yourself political prisoner number 1. Explain that. Explain for the people why you say you're a political prisoner. Go ahead.
Well, actually, that was a phrase that was attributed by the national trial lawyers in an article they wrote about my case. But my book is about not only about how I was targeted by Karl Rove and the Bush Justice Department and their abuse of power and their misuse of the Department of Justice as a political weapon, but it's more than that. It's about how the steps we need to take to balance the scales of justice and save our democracy. It's about holding police, prosecutors, and presidents accountable for their abuses of power.
And for folks who don't realize, Alabama didn't always have Republican governors. You were a Democratic governor elected in that particular state. Highly popular, and you say the President George W. Bush White House and Karl Rove, they came after you. They wanted to take you out.
They not only wanted to, they did take me out. It was Karl Rove's client, the state attorney general, who started the investigation. It was his friend's wife, his business partner's wife, who was elevated to the U.S. attorney, who kicked the federal investigation into high gear. It was Karl Rove's bagman, Jack Abramoff, who put in $20 million to defeat me. It was Karl Rove's client, the state attorney general, who participated in stealing my 2002 election. I was brought to trial 1 month before my re-election bid in 2006 by the U.S. attorney whose husband was running my opponent's campaign. There was sworn testimony before Congressman Conyers, when he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. There was sworn testimony that Karl Rove had directed the Department of Justice to pursue me. There were 113 former state attorneys general all agreed that what I did was political and not criminal. So there's ample evidence to support the claim that the trial lawyers made that I was America's #1 political prisoner.
You first of all, you lay out in the book, you were sentenced 88 months in prison, and they went after everything. You talk about losing your law license, losing your career. You talk about spending time in solitary confinement in prison as well. And so take us through how much your world changed when all of this was going on.
Well, I want to make a comment. Right after I was convicted, I got a phone call from one of my best friends and political allies, Senator Hank Sanders from Selma. He said, "Governor, now you know how black folks feel." But going through the process of being convicted of something that I knew was not a crime and being accused of something that never happened, being found guilty and being sentenced to prison for 88 months, brought it home to me as a former attorney general and governor that our system of justice was broken. You know, some of us, while I had fought the good fight against George Wallace and did all kinds of good things in my political life, I was naively entering into a process, the criminal justice process, that I thought a jury would fix. Surely, even though I was targeted, even though the prosecutor was married to my campaign manager, the campaign manager of my opponent, I thought that the jury would fix this, that I would not be convicted. And when I was, the air just went out of me. I thought, what could I have done differently as Attorney General or as governor to have helped those who were in a similar situation? And then being thrown into prison, I was fortunate to be put in situations where I learned even more about how particularly men and women of color are targeted by police, by investigators, how prosecutors abuse their powers, how they present false evidence or false testimony or withhold exculpatory evidence, and how they wanted long-term convictions, sentences for particularly men of color. And the whole process I look at now as a blessing, because now I'm able to advocate for criminal justice reform with a background and an understanding, not only from my days as Attorney General or Governor, but as an inmate, how this system is broken and how it needs to be fixed.
You were, they hit you with corruption charges. Initially, all of the charges were thrown out by a federal judge. Then they refiled, indicted you on new charges. It was tied to Richard Scrushy, of course, who was a health CEO. And so you were then eventually convicted 7 out of 33 counts by a jury. But explain to the folks the number of Democrats and Republicans who felt there was prosecutorial misconduct, the number of people who came out in your behalf and say you actually got a raw deal. So this book isn't just, oh, you're Don Siegelman just saying, hey, I got a raw deal. I mean, you literally had folks on both sides of the aisle who felt you got screwed.
Yeah, John Grisham said I got screwed too. I was fortunate to have the state attorneys general, former state attorneys general, rally to my cause because they saw this as a turning point in our criminal justice system. If I was convicted of bribery for accepting a campaign contribution to a ballot initiative. It wasn't to my campaign. It was to a ballot initiative to provide better education for Alabama's children. And there was no evidence of a quid pro quo, much less an express quid pro quo. The judge allowed a conviction based on an implied or an inferred quid pro quo, an inferred agreement that never took place, but he allowed the jury to convict. So I became the first and only person in American jurisprudence to ever be sent to jail for bribery where there was no self-enrichment scheme and where I didn't benefit by a single penny. So, but I knew where this was coming from. I knew who was behind it and why they were doing it. This was not a situation where I said, oh, woe is me, how did this happen? I knew why it happened and how it happened, and I knew who was behind it. So my quest throughout my term in prison was to expose the injustice and then to do what I could to fix the justice system. If in every situation there is a purpose, or if in every situation one should find a purpose, the purpose I found was to try to fix this justice system. And before we get too far afield, I want to tell you how we must put the brakes on police who murder black people. If there's been so much discussion, Roland, particularly after after so many blacks have been murdered, shot in the back, traffic violations, or kids, like Tamir Rice shot because he had a plastic gun, or men choked on the streets of New York, or George Floyd. But people talked about what's wrong with this. And of course we need to pass the George Floyd Act. We need to pass H.R. 1 as well. But of course we need to change policing. We need to change politicians as well. But we've also got to change privilege. It is this blanket umbrella of privilege that hangs over the injustices in our criminal justice system. It is police privilege, or the perception of their privilege, that causes the death of so many black people. And while it's going to take Congress to erase qualified immunity, but in the meantime, the way to put the brakes on police murdering black people is to allow the family members of victims of the excessive use of force by police to have a lawyer present in the grand jury. Do you think that George Zimmerman would have been able to walk free if Benjamin Crump had been in the grand jury representing the family of Trayvon Martin? Or if if the family member, Breonna Taylor, had had a lawyer in the grand jury? The reason why, prosecutors across the board, state, local, federal prosecutors, get 99% of the indictments they want. But when it comes to holding police accountable for murdering a black person, the percentage drops precipitously. And there are reasons for that.
Got to ask you this here. When one looks at what took place in this case, they hit you with corruption charges. Later, another Republican was convicted of accepting a couple $100,000, pocketing that money. The prosecutors asked for probation, no jail time. Then, of course, when 60 Minutes did a story on your particular case, the CBS affiliate in town did not even air that segment, claiming there were transmission issues. Do you believe, first of all, not do you believe, but do you lay it out, that clearly there were forces who wanted to take you down and, of course, lead to Republicans being in charge in Alabama? But nothing was ever done to Karl Rove. There was no actual investigation. Even when members of Congress requested documents from then Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, no documents were actually produced. And so what do you want folks to take away? Is there a next? Where do we go with this? What is the lesson we ought to learn or take away from what you went through and what you are alleging with Stealing Our Democracy, this book, and also the documentary that was done on your case as well?
Well, yeah, Congressman John Conyers did everything he could to hold Karl Rove accountable, not only for the selective prosecution and prosecutorial abuse in my case, but he wanted to hold him responsible for what he did in leaking about Valerie Plum, and he did everything he could to get him held in contempt. He wanted him arrested and handcuffed to the basement of the Capitol, but Karl Rove was let off the hook. No one was held responsible for the abuse of power of the Department of Justice under the Bush administration. And what we have seen under Trump, let me back up for a minute. Donald Segretti had a partner in the Dirty Tricks campaign in the Nixon days, and it was Karl Rove. Rove came within a hair of being indicted in the Watergate scandal. If it had not been for George Hubert Walker Bush, who was then chairman of the National Republican Party, Rove would have been caught up in that scandal. But my point here is that if we do not hold police and prosecutors and presidents accountable for their abuse of power, is simply going to get worse.
Well, we're actually experiencing that right now with all the revelations of the Donald Trump Justice Department literally trying to intervene to get folks to overturn the election results in Georgia and Pennsylvania and Arizona. And then what's crazy is Bill Barr says, "Oh, I had no idea about this." Jeff Sessions says, "I had no idea." Rosenstein, I have no idea. You're sitting there going, "Well, who the hell was running the Justice Department then?"
Exactly. Congress, and I hope that the House, subpoenas or gets Bill Barr and Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions before the under oath, before one of the committees in the House. They've got to hold these people accountable. And actually, I'm kind of glad that there's been this revelation that members of Congress were targeted by an abuse of power by the Department of Justice. If the United States Senate, the Republicans, had done what they should have done in the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, if they had convicted him of the out-and-out bribery attempt of the president of Ukraine, we wouldn't have had the insurrection. We wouldn't have had a lot of this that the Republicans are doing now would never have happened. But what is happening now is a direct result of us not holding people accountable for the abuses of power when it is being done right under our noses. The fact that we've got 30 states passing, I don't know how many bills, trying to suppress votes is just another way for Republicans to try to steal an election. This way, they don't have to go to the trouble of stuffing ballot boxes. They just want to legitimize restricting the right to vote. And Joe Manchin needs to be. I started to say read the Riot Act, but that doesn't apply anymore. But Joe Biden needs to get serious with Joe Manchin, and we need to move on with H.R. 1 and get these bills passed.
Well, actually, Ari Berman just sent a tweet out. There's interesting. He says Manchin and Sinema didn't attend Senate Dem lunch, where Texas Democrats spoke about need to pass For the People Act to stop GOP voter suppression. I mean, what in the hell are these two Democrats doing? Senator Kristen Sinema of Arizona, well, the GOP is leading this bogus recount. Then you got Manchin, who's acting like a damn Southern Dixiecrat in 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, that's he needs to join the caucus of Congressman Daniels. When I was elected lieutenant governor, I had some qualms about, because I was going to be president of the Senate presiding. I had to know how to use the gavel, and I talked to the secretary of the Senate, who had been there for some 40 or 50 years, and I told McDowell Lee that I was a little, even though I'd studied the rules and I'd mastered the rules and I knew them better than anybody in the Senate, I said, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to rule quickly enough. He said, "You're going to do fine because you know who your friends are." Well, I don't know that Joe Manchin knows who his friends are. If he did, he would side with the Democrats on H.R. 1 and not with those who are trying to subvert our democracy on the other side of the aisle.
It makes no sense at all. Got to ask you this here. You're there. Just your assessment of Alabama politics right now, the state where you served in political office for a quarter of a century. I'll be honest, you truly have the dumbest United States senator I've ever seen in Tommy Tuberville.
I was going to say which one, but yes, I know which one.
I thought Roy Moore was a true idiot. Tuberville is even dumber. And when you look at just some of the decisions being made, you look at how the state just loves Donald Trump, despite his lying, despite him not being a Christian, despite his values, all this sort of stuff. And so when you hear these, and I'll say these white conservative evangelicals in your state just talk about the Lord and Jesus and all those different things, you got to say, well, what the heck? Do y'all even know Jesus when you go vote?
You know, I have to shake my head, but then, you know, I am a liberal by just about any standard. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with my background, but I was able to bridge the gap in Alabama because I talked about things that seemed to make sense to a majority of people. And I was able to be elected Secretary of State and expand the right to vote for blacks and people with disabilities. As Attorney General, I settled a case which forced the redistricting of every city and county election so that there were hundreds of blacks elected in subsequent years to those offices. And as governor, I was pushing for quality education, early learning, and free college education or free higher education paid for with an education lottery. And we can make a difference. We can change things. We can make things better. And it does take hard work and long hours and a lot of time and energy to convince people to vote for the right things. So even though I was the last Democratic governor, and that was, I was elected twice, inaugurated once, but anyway, that's a story for another day. But I served until 2003, and I do have hope that there will be a Democratic candidate who will come along and will be able to relate to the people of this state and that they can then, join forces and move the state in a different direction.
I asked every author this, and obviously this is your story. I always ask them, was there a particular wow moment for them as they were writing the book, as they were researching the book? Obviously, you lived it and experienced it, but as you were putting this book together, was there that moment that caused even you to say, wow, this is unbelievable, this is crazy, this is just outlandish?
There was this, I may not be able to say this without getting emotional, but there was this one African-American young man. He was younger than me. He had been arrested at 17 for marijuana. It was a felony, put on probation. 19 marijuana felony, put on probation. When he was, I think, 23 or 25, he was arrested again, this time with a small amount of powder cocaine. And of course, if you're black, it's crack. So they sentenced him to 25 years plus. He served all of his time. He's out now. But I asked him to tell me his story, and he did. And, it's just one of those stories where he was trying to help his mother pay the water bill, the light bill, to keep things in the house, to get food. And, but it just exemplified to me the tens of thousands, if not millions, of blacks who have been imprisoned by the abuse of power by prosecutors and police and investigators. Let me remind you of this, too. This is something that will shock your listeners. And that on January the 4th, 2010, during the Obama administration, there was a story written in the Los Angeles Times by David Savage, the Los Angeles legal correspondent, who said that President Obama's lawyer, Elena Kagan, argued to the United States Supreme Court yesterday. That was January, when he wrote the story, January the 5th. But that U.S. citizens do not have a constitutional right not to be framed. U.S. citizens do not have a constitutional right not to be framed. And of course, the fact is, Elena Kagan was right, because the Supreme Court in 1976 gave blanket immunity to prosecutors to knowingly and willfully present false evidence and false testimony or withhold exculpatory evidence with no penalty. They can do this with impunity, and they have for decades. And while we can't make Congress do the right thing and abolish immunity for prosecutors, President Biden can at least tell his Merrick Garland to inform the U.S. attorneys that if they are caught presenting false evidence or testimony or withholding exculpatory evidence, they will be fired. We've got to begin to change the dynamics in our justice system, and in my view, it starts with holding police and prosecutors and, yes, presidents accountable for their abuse of power.
The book, folks, is called Stealing Our Democracy, How the Political Assassination of a Governor Threatens Our Nation, by Don Siegelman. This is the book right here. So, Don, where can people get the book?
They can, what I would suggest is that they get the Audible version, because I did it in my own voice, and because Amazon offers all kinds of artists to read the book for you, but I wanted people to hear the inflection in my voice and the sadness in my voice and the happiness and joy in my voice, or the pain in my voice as I was experiencing things, the injustices that many, particularly Black families have experienced themselves. So I'd suggest that people go online to Amazon and get the Audible version. If they can tolerate my voice for a little while, I think they'll enjoy listening to my side of the story.
All right. Don Siegelman, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Racial injustice is a scourge on this nation, and the Black community has felt it for generations. We have an obligation to do something about it. Whether it's canceling student debt, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in Black-owned businesses, the Black community deserves so much better. I'm Nina Turner, and I'm running for Congress to do something about it.